Hey everybody, this is Dave coming to you from the Gaming Cave, and today we're going to start working on our playthrough of Midway Solitaire Deluxe Edition. This is the rule book, and I think what we'll do first here is, you can see I got a lot of counters down here. I haven't done the complete setup on the board yet, so I wanted to walk through a couple things, because the first time I did this, I was like, man, I was confused. I don't know why, but things were confusing me. So I thought, let's go through this and make sure of everything that we have here. And a couple things on Board Game Geek. One of the players put out a sequence of play for the IGN Imperial Japanese Navy phase. It is peculiar, and I agree with him on his comments. The game producer, manufacturer for Decision Games actually did a really cool handout player aid that's got special operation markers and procedures and what they mean, what you do with them, and it's all really described, so you don't have to go look it up in the rule book. Also, organization actions. So you have your, G1 for the U.S. Navy, G1, G2, G3, G4. So it's got all the steps there, everything you need to do. That's the only one they gave us. They didn't give us anything else for the Japanese, and they have the brunt of the moves. And up here at the top of the board is the sequence of play track. So it tells you what steps you're doing, but it doesn't tell you what you got to do. So if you don't have something, you're going to go back to your rules all the time. So this player made this sequence of play for the Imperial Japanese Navy phase, and he lists what the rule number is and then what you need to do. And you can follow this, and then if you got a question, you can flip back and you know which section of the rules you're looking at. So he does all the way through on the Japanese Navy segment, and then there's a break in here for the combat segment. And then he wraps it up, and then he also made actually the combat sequence of play, which I find is very helpful because you just follow it. You do this one, then this one, then this one. And that works out really well. So I'll be using those during my gameplay along with the one handout. Then, I read on Board Game Geek a lot of times when I get a game, and I look, and there's some errata out there, and there were some confusing items, and it was all around the setup, and the markers weren't right, and the counts didn't come out right, and I started having trouble. So one of the things in the game is there are optional rules, and with the optional rules you get optional counters. So you can get a counter such as this, and you can see it says optional. You can't see very well, but I'm trying to get it. Camera don't want to just focus on it, wants to focus on my fingers. It says optional right here in the bottom right. That's an optional counter. You don't want that in there. Somehow I managed to put a battleship optional counter in my counters, and I was getting them all messed up. There's also Fuchida. He's an optional commander. You only use him if you're using that optional rule for him. We also separate these markers here. These are your chit draw that you're going to do. So these are your operation markers, and they're going to tell you, what you have to do, like this operation here, or if you pull, there's a commander. Let me set this down. There's a commander token, Yamamoto. He creates a certain task that happens. Another one, let's see, I'm looking for, then there's, hunting for it here. There's this one called Victory Spirit for the Japanese. And there's actually two of these. And the way I take this is, I play with both of them in this draw, because there's 22 of these markers counting this. But if you're going to use the optional Fuchida, then you take one of these out and put Fuchida in there. So there's still only 22. It doesn't go up to 23. It's still just 22. Now that's the way I take it. That's the way I'm playing it. So I have two of those in here. Depending on when they come up in the game, they're either very good or very bad for the Japanese. So you never know. Then in my other cup, there are these red markers. And these have different things that happen. So when the task forces move, regardless of whether it's Japanese or US, you pull one of these after their move and you see what happens. This one is incident intelligence. So something happens with intelligence. This one is incident 2 submarine. Incident 1 submarine. So there's different ones that are going to happen here. There's some that say calm seas. There's some that say weather, which means there's no air operations on that route. Okay. So all those are in a cup, and you use them. You keep reusing those. There's a battle marker that we'll use to mark battles. Will be mixed into the ships. There are 3 deception markers, so they're in the task forces. We don't know which ones they are. Okay. We have these are the carrier groups, the Akagi, the actual carrier. Then you have your light carrier like the Ryujo. And then you'll have destroyer like DD3, destroyer groups. They represent multiple ships when they're on there. There's also battleships, cruisers, light cruisers. So we have all those things that are going on too. Okay. So I found after a couple setups that I finally think I figured it out. So I just wanted to walk through this in case you're new to the game. And if you already know it, you'll probably just skip through this. Don't even worry about it. I've already set up the U.S. forces. So you use the setup is in the rules themselves. So we come over here and let me find it real quick. Yeah. So here in the rule book, you have setup, and it goes through and it tells you at the Alaska home base, you put in bomber. LAC is land-based aircraft, and fighter land-based aircraft. And it tells you which one. 11th Air Force. Task Force 8 goes up there, not spotted. So we just go down through the list and you put everybody right there where they go. And then everything else goes into the board. And one thing I did do that I got to change, I forgot to set these back. The Saratoga is a damaged unit, and then I have a battleship and a destroyer group that are all in reinforcements. So the Saratoga is sitting in the damaged unit. So we have a chance to get her repaired and put her in operation wherever we think we're going to need her. Okay. Now, next thing was the Japanese setup. So the one thing I've already done up here is I went in and put all the task force markers where they go. And task force are like the 4th carrier strike force for the Japanese. Or, oops, wrong one. Yeah. Or they have a support force. Or they might have an invasion force. And they also say spotted on one side. You flip them over and they're not spotted. So you don't know what's in them. So we flip, everybody's unspotted when we start the game. Okay. Up here's all the carriers where you place the fighters. So each carrier, each carrier group here, come on, has, they'll have like the carrier name, Soryu, A6M, so that's your 0 fighters, and of course it says fighter, naval aircraft. And then we also have the bomber, for these are VALs, so they're dive bombers. So that's what's in that group there on that carrier. Okay, so you know what's on the carriers, we just don't know which carriers are where. Okay, Now, one thing is that I finally kind of settled on to. A lot of comments are older comments on Board Game Geek, because this game started out as a magazine game and then was developed into the board game. It's been a few years, probably 4 or 5. So this rule book was put out in 2021. So this is the most up-to-date rule book there is. And I'm going strictly by the rule book, because I think now with all the red comments where they made important statements, they've added some things, some exceptions. So the rule book is, to me, is right. So for the Japanese setup, the first thing we have to do is there's 5 CVL, which are light carrier naval units, and we place them face down. So I have them separated, they're right here. So we're gonna move them up here, face down, and we're gonna mix them up. And really, does it matter a whole lot? No, I don't think there's too much difference between them all. So it's like the shell game, where's which one? Okay, now we take one each. One goes in the covering task force, one in the invasion MI, which is Midway task force, and one in the main body A. Okay, so we'll take one and we'll put him in the covering task force. So up here in the top left, it says covering force. We put him down. And now, while I'm there, see if I can get my camera up here. We can see a little bit. I apologize because this isn't the best camera for zooming, like I use my other one a lot of times. These all say they have a number in parentheses up here on the board. And that's how many ships go into that task force. And it can never be higher than that number. Okay? All right. So we put one in the covering force. We put one in the Midway task force. And the thing that I've already got, and I leave them revealed because it tells us which ones go there, are the transport ships. So there's TR1 and TR2 are in the Midway task force. I don't care about, I know they're there, so it doesn't matter to me. We're not hiding them or anything. And then the last one goes into the main body A. Okay, main body A right there. Now that left me with 2 light cruisers left over. So I now mix those in with these 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, with those 6. These 6. So now we put these guys up here. It gives me 8. 3, 5, 7, 8. So again, we're just kind of mixing these up. And I know one of the other gamers that did a playthrough, he said it's easier to do this before you put the US out there so the whole board's empty. To do all this part of the setup first. And probably if I was just starting my setup, I probably would do that too because it would be a little easier. Okay, now we put 4 of these carriers in the first carrier strike force. So we're going to take 1, we don't look at them, 1, 2, 3, and 4. Those guys are in that task force. We put 2 in the second and 2 in the fourth. Okay, 1, 2, and 1, 2. Those make up your carriers right there. Okay, the next thing we do is now we have to do the invasion units. We already did these. So they're where they go. You have 2 invasion transports in the Port Moresby task force. We have 1 in the Solomons, 2 in the Midway, and 1 in the Aleutians. So they're already there. Now we take all the battleships, cruisers, light cruisers, and destroyer units, and 3 deception markers, and we make them face down. And then we're going to start doling them out here. So all of these, that's what all of these are. So we'll flip all of these over right here. And you know, you could kind of like the game pieces in combat, you can feel the difference. You know, it's rounded on the top side, flat, sharper on the bottom. You could throw them in a cup and pull them out that way if you wanted to, so that you wouldn't look at them if you were so inclined. Oop, mix my task force up there. Okay, I have no idea where anything is. All right, so the first thing we do is we take 3 of these markers, 1, 2, 3, and we put them in task force in the first carrier strike force. And that makes a total of 7 ships. That's the most they can have. Okay, we put 1 in the second. Makes him 3. We put 1 in the fourth. Put him there. Now the main body A, he gets 2 markers. So we go 2, main body A. Now you go 2, main body B. So we'll take these 2, put them there. And support, he gets 1. Put him there. The guard force gets 2. So we have 2. Covering force gets 1. Invasion Mosby gets 1. Invasion Solomons gets 1. Now Invasion Midway gets 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay? And Invasion Aleutians goes there. So, one key is all the ships got used. The other one is that they all equal the number that they have in parentheses. So that's another quick way. You don't have to use the rule book. Once you set your carriers, then all you got to do is shuffle them all up, and then you just balance them out for what's left to put in the square. All right, so that got us set up. So we now have the game set up. As you can see, there are no turn markers. The game turns work as you pull one of these markers out. We place it up here, and it works its way through the sequence of play track. And when it gets to the administrative phase, that turn is done. So this is a dynamic kind of game where you may start a battle. Something could start happening along Midway, and then it'll shift to the Aleutians or shift down here to the South Pacific. Okay. Also, this dotted line is the Japanese defensive line. So there's a rule for when they get outside of that. I believe for the spotting rules. I got to double check that. Make sure I get that right. And then these black lines are our main base connectors. So Pearl Harbor goes to Alaska, so does West Coast. And there's a line missing. Everybody has said it, and I believe it. There should be a line from Pearl Harbor to West Coast, and I'll probably get my ruler and my pen and draw that across there and mark that line. So they're connected. So you can go directly from West Coast to Pearl Harbor or West Coast to Alaska. And in one case where you have this Australian or Royal Australian Air Force reinforcement marker, he can go from West Coast to Australia, which is way down here. Okay. Oops, he belongs there. All right. Then we have, so to get from Pearl Harbor to, let's say, the Solomons, you would have to move to Samoa, to New Caledonia, and then up into the Solomons. So it takes you a lot longer. The white circle, so it's one move to get to there, one move to get to there. Then you got these white circles. These are movement points along the route. So they also count. The green squares, like right here for Midway, that's the Japanese objective. And right now, I have a coastal defense unit on there. It's got a U.S. flag, so it's under U.S. control. And we also have aircraft here. Now, a couple things. The initial start of the aircraft is listed right here on the board for the number of units you can have is 5. And that matches the coastal defense marker says 5. But if it gets damaged, that drops to 3. And if it drops to 3, you can only have 3 air units. So if none of them got eliminated, you have to take 2 air units out also. Okay. So as your coastal defenses get eliminated, so do your ground-based aircraft. Just like on ships, if I lose a carrier, carriers can handle so many different squadrons, but if there's no place for them to land, if I don't have an air base that they can get to, then they crash and they're gone from the game. Okay. So quite a few little things. The game itself is not overly complicated, as we'll see when we start to play through. It's just kind of like, you know, all these areas because there's 22 of these chits in there. You know they're all going to get hit sooner or later. The question is, which one's going to come first? And where do you start? Do you have enough here to take care of Midway? Do you need to, what do you need to do, right? Okay. A couple limiting factors on your movements. All the ships except the battleships can move 2 spaces. So they can move 2 when you move them. Battleships can only move 1. So I don't want my task force to be slowed down by my battleship. I don't want my carrier slowed down because of battleships. So usually your battleships may become part of their own combat force somewhere. Okay, so we don't want them to get tied up with that. All right. Then you have task forces. We have one that's available to be made up here. If we need one, we can reorganize task forces. We'll go through all that during the gameplay. We also have U.S. commanders. So we have Spruance and Fletcher right now. And Halsey's an optional, which we won't be using the optional rules for this game. So with Fletcher, what he really gains you is +1 on your movement. They don't gain you a bunch of combat strength or anything like that. They just gain you the ability to move a little faster, which is important. So in the rule book, leaders are assigned to a task force, which they're already assigned to task force 16 and 17. That's where the carriers are. They move with their task force. They're not an individual unit. They only get eliminated if the assigned task force has all assigned naval units eliminated. They don't count against capacity. They can be reassigned as part of a G1 reorganization action. They must always be with the task force, cannot operate independently. No more than 1 leader can be assigned to a task force at any one time. And so their effects are the task force movement is increased by 1 when conducting a G3 naval operation and increased by 1 home base when conducting a G3 redeploy action. So in other words, the task force can move from 1 Navy home base through another U.S. Navy home base and then into a second one if the leader's assigned there. So if I had a leader in 16, which I do, if he can move 1, 2, the leader would make him move 3. He could actually get all the way close to Midway. Or if I want them to come down here, if I want these guys to come back, they could actually get from New Caledonia to Samoa, and then the leader could get them to Pearl Harbor. So you can see, like to have more leaders because they can make you zip around the board, but it's not what we have. So this is what we have to deal with. Okay. All right. I think really, I think that's all we have to go through for the setup. That's what I wanted to do. I just kind of wanted to show you, you know, how the basic setup was, how to get your counters put in place, get everything divided into the cups. You do have some extra components. The game gives you 1 6-sided die. They actually give you this one. It's got those sharp corners. I like the rounded edges. I think they roll better. And I'm going to use a red one for my Japanese rolls. That just seems appropriate. And then either the black or the white for the U.S. Navy. Okay. So I'm going to cut this one off. We won't mix the gameplay in with the setup. That way, you know, if you already know how to do the setup, you can skip this video and go on to the next one for the actual gameplay. And then we'll get the gameplay going. Usually, probably in a session, depending on what chits we pull, we'll be able to go 2 or 3 rounds, and that way I can keep the sessions a little shorter. So I think that'll do me for today for this one, for the setup, and we're all geared up here and ready to go. And we'll see how the gameplay goes. And I'm looking forward to it. And I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, give me a thumbs up, please. And if you're new to the channel, then please subscribe. Okay, I'll see you guys later. Thanks.